Bill Nye Season 1, Episode 13 is about
population and resources.
Were you going to say population control, Bill? I think you were. This episode is about the dangers of overpopulation. We're growing too fast, soaking up all the Earth's resources.
Good at distributing it. It gets caught up in certain places and not distributed to the people who need it.
We need to treat our women more like they're being treated in the third world.
Do you think those policies are going to come over here, be like pressure from the developing world to the developed world?
It has to eventually. Women won't put up with this for much longer, women in the United States. Countries like China and Russia and Albania and Serbia.
And never mind about the rampant population growth in the third world.
Our two kids are way more problematic. The Nigerians with an average 7 children are not the problem.
My issues with this episode fall into 3 categories. First, factual inaccuracies. Even trivial factual inaccuracies are corrosive to the credibility of this show. Second, the social plan Bill is advocating isn't based on evidence. And third, Bill is suggesting some truly bad ideas. The show dispatches a correspondent to India in order to take a look at the maternity leave policy of a major Indian software company called Infosys. The whole thing seems a bit like a promotional ad for Infosys.
Change is happening, and it's happening right here on the campus of India's tech giant Infosys. And that change arrives every morning in the form of 68,000 female employees, fully 1/3 of the company's workforce.
The correspondent describes Infosys's maternity leave policy in glowing terms. Infosys offers 14 weeks of maternity leave, and they offer paternity leave too. You know what? That is nice. But the correspondent goes way too far when she says,
What I liked about Infosys the most that's really unique to their company is that they have 16 weeks of paid maternity leave. They have paid paternity leave and paid leave for adoptive parents, which, these policies are unheard of in the United States.
Infosys, the tech company, has a nice maternity leave policy. However, when you compare it to American tech companies, you see that Infosys is actually marginally worse than top American tech firms on the measure of maternity leave. Infosys is a major tech company in India. So let's take a look at maternity leave policies in major American tech companies, as compiled by Time magazine. Adobe offers 26 weeks maternity leave and paternity leave. That's better than Infosys. Amazon, 20 weeks. Better than Infosys. Apple, 18 weeks, better than Infosys. Facebook, 16 weeks, 16 weeks paternity leave, better than Infosys. Google, 18 weeks plus paternity leave, better than Infosys. Microsoft, 20 weeks plus paternity leave, better than Infosys. When correspondents don't even bother to put basic facts like this into perspective, it really puts the entire show into question. If you're getting something so basic wrong, what does that imply about more complicated issues? Bill's plan for dealing with overpopulation is to educate women. Educated women have fewer children. By educating women, Bill expects there to be more female engineers and thus more capacity to solve problems presented by overpopulation. And Bill also expects there to be fewer children due to education and thus less overpopulation to be dealt with. This is the most coherent a plan I've seen from Bill Nye, so he deserves some credit for that. However, this plan ignores 2 crucial pieces of evidence. First, if you were to ask women their preference, they likely wouldn't tell you that they'd prefer to give up their opportunity to have children in order to be some corporate wage slave. Pew Research indicates that, quote, when asked to name the ideal number of children for a family, a plurality of Americans, 46%, say 2, trailed by 26% who say 3. Only 9% select 4. 3% chose 0, 1, or at least 5. If you multiply the number of desired children by the percentage that desire that number, then divide by 100 families, you can find that the desired children per family is 2.24. Pew Research also shows, quote, the latest report from the National Center for Health Statistics used the general fertility rate to show that U.S. fertility in 2013 was at an all-time low, End quote. The lifetime births per woman was 1.86 in 2006, which is about 83% of the ideal rate. A paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research draws this conclusion. Quote, trends in self-reported subjective well-being indicate that happiness has shifted toward men and away from women. This shift holds across industrialized countries, regardless of whether the aggregate trend in happiness for both genders is flat, rising, or falling. In all of these cases, we see happiness rebalancing to reflect greater happiness for men relative to women. This finding of a decline in women's well-being relative to that of men raises questions about whether modern social constructs have made women worse off, or alternatively, about the interpretability of subjective well-being. I can't help but wonder if women exchanging their childbearing years and hopes of ideal number of children in exchange for corporate wage slavery has had a negative impact on the happiness of women. That women should continue to make this trade is a key part of Bill's plan to stop overpopulation. That women want to make this trade is an unsupported assumption on Bill's part. The second unsupported assumption on Bill's part is that Bill thinks that if men and women were equally educated, that they would seek careers in engineering in equal measure.
Half the people in the world are girls and women. So let's have half the scientists and engineers be girls and women.
Bill is making the unsupported assumption that men and women have equal aptitudes and preferences. Bill is also making the implicit and probably untrue claim that the current education system biases against women becoming engineers. The American Psychological Association conducted a study based on research from 1914 through 2011, spanning more than 30 countries, including grades for 538,710 boys and 595,332 girls. What they found is, quote, the most important finding observed here is that our analysis of 502 effect sizes drawn from 369 samples revealed a consistent female advantage in school marks for all course content areas, end quote. And a little later, quote, the fact that females generally perform better than their male counterparts throughout what is essentially mandatory schooling in most countries seems to be a well-kept secret, considering how little attention it has received as a global phenomenon. In other words, in K-12 education, girls outperform boys in every subject, math and science included. More women are admitted to college than men, and more women graduate from college than men. In some places, the ratio is approaching 2-to-1. Additionally, there are innumerable programs, scholarships, and outreach efforts intended to promote women pursuing STEM fields. The idea, which Bill Nye ignorantly suggests, that women are disadvantaged from pursuing a STEM career is patently absurd. A more reasonable explanation is that men and women have different aptitudes and preferences. These aptitudes lead women to educations and careers in design, education, social work, nursing, and therapy. Conversely, men tend towards educations and careers in engineering, sciences, and construction. There's nothing sexist about making these observations. All the evidence available suggests that men and women have different aptitudes and preferences. Bill Nye and friends, on the other hand, are being sexist by making the implicit value judgment that the careers men have a natural interest in and aptitude for are somehow superior to the careers that women are interested in pursuing. Because of that value judgment, Bill and those like him are trying to correct the preferences of women and get them to act more like men when it comes to picking education and career. That's sexist. Bill's strategy to stop overpopulation won't work. It ignores women's happiness, and it also ignores the obvious fact that in developed countries, women are already well educated and having fewer children than they want, and less than the replacement rate. In other words, populations of developed nations are already declining, or they would be if it weren't for immigration. Bill and friends set aside the issue of the exploding population in the developing world. Forget exponentially increasing people will either be consigned to live in desperate poverty for the rest of their lives, or they'll develop to the point that they start consuming more resources and emitting more pollution, Or they'll immigrate to developed countries and start using comparable amounts of resources and emitting comparable amounts of pollution. Instead of focusing on where the problem needs to be solved, which is the developing world, Bill tries to focus on where the problem, if you believe overpopulation is a problem, has already been solved, the developed world. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button to let me know. Coming up next, we'll talk about immigration in Sweden and healthcare in the United States. If you're interested, please subscribe. One bonus criticism of Bill Nye: the comedy is awful.
Hey guys, oh my God. There's a control on the amount of births. Terrible joke, and I apologize. I have an IUD, it's in my uterus, you can't feel it. Terrible joke, and I apologize. Death to sperm. Terrible joke, and I apologize.